We asked Realtors to describe the past 3 years in Canada's housing market. Terrible, paralyzed, and twilight zone were a few things that came to mind. Take a look at this graph. Monthly home sales in Canada each year. This line is the average at any given time based on the previous 10 years. And this is the past few years, where you can see sales fell well below that 10-year average. That was the terrible. But look here at this little spike. That's the end of 2024, when things started to look like they were about to rebound in a big way. Interest rates were finally down to what the Bank of Canada considered neutral, a nice steady place. Buyers were jumping back into the market, and pretty much everyone was predicting this was just the beginning. Both prices and sales would jump in 2025.
What we were seeing around the fourth quarter of 2024 was a really strong recovery.
In Toronto, we were seeing 40% year-over-year increases in sales volume. In Vancouver, 30%.
But then, just a month later, the twilight zone, because all of that fell off a cliff.
We had that momentum more or less continue to January, and then February completely fell off.
Things all started to kind of unravel again a little bit.
Let's try to understand what happened. According to the Canadian Real Estate Association, home sales took a nosedive right across the country last month, falling about 10% from January to February. That's the biggest monthly drop we've seen in almost 3 years. But if you zoom in on Canada's most expensive markets, the drop was even bigger, almost 13% in Vancouver and close to a 30% drop in Toronto. And here's another way to look at it. Sales were also down in a big way when you compare this February to last February. And that's a big deal because interest rates in February 2024, so a year ago, were still at their peak. What were mortgage rates back then? Like 7%. It was a tough time to buy because you knew your mortgage would be expensive. Now, you're looking at maybe mortgage rates a bit over half that, which isn't too bad. And yet, far fewer people are buying.
For the month of February, 2025 is the lowest number of detached home sales on record, going back to 1997.
And it's not like buyers are just waiting for more options. In Toronto, for example, listings are close to double what they were this time last year. So what's going on?
The tariffs, we're going to tariff the hell out of them.
I am a tariff man.
It's really hard to point to anything except all of the uncertainty caused by tariff and all the threats about tariffs.
And the head of the Canadian Real Estate Association came to the same conclusion, writing, "The uncertainty of the last few weeks seems to be causing some buyers to think twice about big financial decisions right now." And it's not hard to imagine why that might be true when headlines like these are becoming more and more common. A Canadian company bleeding out jobs. Because let's say you work at a company like that, where the workforce was almost cut in half. But for years, you've been dreaming of a bigger home. You had a plan to sell your place, buy a new one, and take on a bigger mortgage because it's a really nice place. But you just watched hundreds of your colleagues lose their jobs. How do you feel about your job security right now? Is this the best time to take on more financial debt?
If you're not sure about your job, the mortgage is not something that you can decide that at some later point, I don't want to do this anymore. You don't get to go to the bank and say, I was reconsidering my options. Can I just not pay for the next little while? With rental options, you can get out of your lease. You can move to a different place. You can upsize, downsize based on your economic environment. But buying and selling a home is much more difficult.
According to the Conference Board of Canada, all of this tension brought by tariffs pushed consumer confidence down 12 points in February, which is the largest one-month drop since 2023, and only a few points higher than it was in April 2020 when the whole country shut down due to COVID.
That same uneasiness that we felt in the pandemic has creeped back in.
So all of this uncertainty has meant many more people who were on the line, teetering between buying and waiting, they've opted to play it safe. But here's the flip side of that. For those who are willing and able to dive into the housing market, now might be a pretty good time.
It is, a bit of a Goldilocks moment.
So it's hard to know exactly how big this group is of prospective home buyers waiting with question marks over their heads over on the sidelines. But according to everyone we spoke to, there is no doubt that there is pent-up demand.
Certainly, it's a substantial cohort of people who want to get in and are just waiting.
And if you're one of those people, you may have some leverage because, say, the person you're buying from needs to sell in the next 30 days for whatever reason. Since sales are down, they're likely getting fewer offers, and that means less of a bidding war for you.
You can negotiate with willing sellers, right? Sellers who have had their listings on the market for 90 days plus, right? They're usually in a scenario where they might be willing to entertain kind of lower offers, right? Lowball offers.
We're finding that with the clients we're working with. They're negotiating, they're getting lower prices, they're in the driver's seat. So they definitely have a lot more power and leverage than they ever had in the past.
And what generally happens when buyers have leverage? Prices tend to come down. And we're starting to see that materialize too, with a 3.3% drop in the national average sale price year over year across Canada.
It's one of these rare moments where you have a buyer's market, which is not very common, especially in Canada's biggest cities like Toronto and Vancouver. I can't remember the last time this happened in the Toronto market.
And what makes this maybe a little more unusual is the fact that this is all happening at a time when the Bank of Canada is aggressively cutting interest rates.
I mean, super unusual. I've been in real estate now for over 13 years. I haven't experienced this before.
These type of rate cuts, 7 consecutive ones, doesn't happen very often.
It's really the fear factor that's keeping people out of the market now. It's not interest rates. It's not the availability of homes. It is just fear.
So this all reads like great news if you're a buyer ready to make a move. But just know this, the window of opportunity might, maybe, be pretty small. And I'll give you a few reasons why. Last spring, a BMO survey showed that 72% of aspiring homeowners in Canada, meaning people who don't own a home but want to, they were waiting for interest rates to drop. And another survey tried to figure out how far they'd need to drop for people to jump in. And it found the vast majority of people were waiting for the overnight rate to hit 2.75%. That just happened.
As of right now, I'd say, yeah, I mean, there's certainly that kind of Goldilocks zone where there is a decent amount of inventory, lower rates. But if all buyers decide to re-enter the market over the next few months and there is a flurry of buying activity, we could then see this other weird zone where, like, even with all of the uncertainty and all the nonsense going on in the market, pricing start to push upwards again.
And we saw something similar happen a few years ago in early 2020. Home sales, home prices, and interest rates all dropped. And yeah, the going was good for a while. A golden opportunity for those who were able to push past the pandemic hardship and uncertainty. You could buy a home at a lower price and at an ultra low rate.
If you look at the third and fourth quarters of 2020, there were still people who were very, very nervous about leaving the safety of their homes to even go look for something, and others that boldly charged into the market before prices went up and feel like they won the lottery.
Right, because if you waited too long, somewhere between half a year and a year later, all of that pent-up demand and all those people looking to take advantage of low rates, they jumped in and prices skyrocketed.
Initially, the pandemic caused home sales to slump, but insiders say 2021 numbers are already surpassing expectations, and millennials are among those driving up sales.
I think people just became more confident, and that is when the wave of people kind of started rushing back into the market.
Which brings us back to the biggest question in all of this. What would it take for that confidence to return this time?
There has to be, again, a catalyst that kind of tells buyers that, okay, now we know what the new normal is. Either there will be tariffs or there won't be tariffs. So once that happens, then we can all adjust to whatever that new normal is. And then I feel at that point, then we will see kind of like that rebalancing of the market.
Now, predictions are a dangerous game. If Trump did, in fact, cause this turmoil in the housing market with this constant threat of tariffs, he could just as easily do something else tomorrow or the day after to once again completely rearrange the equation. So change can come fast, and it's worth paying attention.